You arrive as the heat loosens its grip, when the sun has drifted low and the plateau exhales a long, even breath. The city behind you muffles itself into a distant hush. You notice it first as a texture more than a sound, a faint pressure of air that slides over stone and rough sand, steady and unhurried. You let your shoulders drop. You were here to move slowly. You were here to allow your thoughts to unspool like a quiet ribbon in twilight. Ahead, the shape you know from 1,000 images gathers itself out of the softening light. The Great Pyramid does not appear suddenly. It resolves by degrees, as if the evening is letting you see only what you can hold at once. Edges emerge. A plane catches the last color of the sky. Another side rests in shadow, like a folded blanket. You come closer at a patient pace, your steps measured so that nothing jars. Your feet find small hollows in the ground, the sand rounding each footprint without hurry, the grains dry and cool from the day's release. You pause and listen. The wind is a thread that doesn't break. A stray call from far below on the road reaches you, thin and harmless, like a memory whispering from another room. Somewhere a dog barks and then thinks better of it. It is not silence, but something easier, a field of gentle, repeating notes. In this field, you can place the great stone outline, and in placing it, you feel the scale begin to settle into your body. Your breath evens out. The pyramid is no longer a picture. It is a presence that asks for unforced attention. You let your eyes wander, not for facts, not for conclusions, but for surfaces. The blocks step upward in a calm procession, course by course, each face worn by time into a shallow softness. Long ago, they were crisper and brighter, faced with fine limestone that caught the early sun like a pale sail. The core shows through, familiar and steady. A texture almost like wood grain, but in stone, patterned by wind, dust, and patience. The topmost sky turns a cooler blue. A first star pricks through, small and steady, as if to mark a beginning rather than an end. As you stand, you begin to feel how the ground carries the structure without strain. The plateau is not just a stage. It is part of the story. From here, the land falls away towards the river's dark ribbon, though you cannot see the water directly. Only the suggestion of it in the air's faint sweetness and the way distant lights align, like beads along a calm string. Somewhere down there, long ago, boats leaned into the current. Their hulls hollow sounding when knuckles wrapped them at dawn, the smell of wet rope and fresh-cut reeds rising quietly. You do not need to hurry toward that memory. You allow it to hover, then float, then rest. You approach the base. The lowest courses are taller than you expect. They hold a polite, immovable line. The joints are clean where they have been protected, looser where weather has spoken longer, but even loosened, they keep company with one another in a patient geometry. You lay your palm a moment on the stone. It is cooler than the air, a slow storehouse of a day's warmth, giving itself back in a measured trickle. Your hand accepts the texture. Fine grit presses softly into your skin and reminds you how material this place is, how it refuses to become only symbol or story. But when you lift your gaze again, the pyramid's slope leads your attention upward with no urgency. You follow as far as your neck allows, and then you stop. The top is not the point right now. The point is the way the lines hold steady without strain, the way their steadiness talks to your breathing. The old blocks have given up any need to surprise. They prefer to reassure. You let them. Small beetle works its way past your shoe, certain of its route among pebbles that, to it, are boulders. You step aside to accommodate this purposeful citizen and notice, how even the tiny movements here adopt the same unhurried rhythm. The air dries your skin without you minding. The night will not be cold, only cooler, like a soft sheet pulled across a resting body. You recall that people have been arriving at dusk for as long as there have been evenings, each person bringing their own small bundle of questions. Most questions were likely practical. Where to rest? How to find shade tomorrow? Which stone will be moved? And how, and with whom. Some questions, no doubt, were larger and slower, shaped like the structure itself. What makes a line true? How a group of hands adds up to a single intention. What it feels like to mark a place so that it keeps speaking long after the words themselves have hushed. You do not need to answer any of this. You are allowed to let the questions sit with you like quiet companions who do not require conversation. A thin crescent moon draws itself above the west, and the slope catches a narrow band of light that looks almost like old polish. You picture the casing stones that once wrapped the whole in a bright skin. And without seeing them, you feel their echo, a smoothness underneath the present rough, an older clarity that would have slid your fingertips toward the sky. Time has turned brilliance into comfort. Comfort suits your purposes tonight. The city's hum is now only a background wash. Your breathing has found the same tempo as the wind. You feel the day's thoughts stack themselves like courses of stone, heavy but orderly, each finding its resting place so that the next can settle. Whatever you carried up here, small worries, stray plans, lists with boxes to check, arranges itself within that structure without protest. You do not need to set anything down. The shape itself holds it for you. You take a few steps along the base, tracing a corner that meets the world cleanly. Corners can be sharp, or they can be calm. This one is calm. If you think of the hands that measured, the cord pulled, taut, the line snapped, the mark made without hurry. You think of how much can be done at a human pace when the pace is kept. The idea comforts you more than any solution might. This, too, is part of what you came for. When you pause again, the dark has deepened enough that the sky feels close. The first cool touches the back of your neck. You tuck your chin slightly and listen. Grain of sand clicks softly against another grain and then stops. The wind continues. The pyramid continues. You continue, but not toward anything. You simply continue, and that is enough. In a moment, you will sit at the edge of the stone and pay attention to the ground itself, the plateau that carries all this with quiet strength. The bedrock that receives the breeze and returns it unchanged. For now, you let the last color leave the western edge and allow your eyes to settle. The evening has arranged the scene for rest. You accept the arrangement, and you prepare to lean closer to the earth beneath the monument, where the story deepens and slows. You remain close to the base of the pyramid, but now your attention loosens and drifts toward the ground itself. Beneath the stone courses and the footsteps of countless years lies the plateau, an ancient sheet of bedrock that carries not only one pyramid, but an entire company of them. You begin to feel how the monument is less an isolated object and more an extension of this table of limestone, raised and weathered long before any human hand considered it. The plateau is not smooth. You sense the rises and shallow falls, the modest undulations that catch a faint line of shadow as the last light slips away. When you place your heel down, you notice the firmness. This ground does not give. It is not sand drifting with every breeze, but hard, compressed stone, a foundation chosen deliberately, with care. The builders must have walked much as you do now, scanning with patient eyes for cracks, testing the sound under their feet with gentle taps. You imagine them listening for hollows, for weakness, for anything that could betray the weight they intended to place here. If you walk in their echo, the air gathers itself across the surface in long threads. It is not gusty or sharp, but even, as if the plateau has trained the wind in the art of composure. Your clothing shifts slightly, a sleeve against your wrist, a soft brush across your neck. Each touch reminds you that the desert is not empty. It is active, but its activity prefers calm repetition over surprise. You inhale, and the dryness carries with it the faint taste of mineral dust. It is not unpleasant. It is simply part of the plateau, a trace of the rock itself offered to you in each breath. As you wander slowly, your steps crunch on scattered chips of limestone, broken away in times so far back that no one marked the moment. These fragments have settled into shallow pockets, resting against one another, as if content to remain here forever. Their pale color still holds a suggestion of warmth, as if the sun that left the horizon moments ago lingers in memory. You find yourself slowing, almost to stillness, letting the fragments speak their subtle language of weight, of time, of persistence. You glance toward the horizon, where the desert stretches out, wide and unhurried. The land is not anxious to arrive anywhere, rolls with a quiet certainty, rising toward distant ridges that barely interrupt the sky. The Nile, though hidden from sight, is not forgotten. You sense it through the arid's presence, felt in the gentle moderation of temperature, in the faint trace of moisture carried on the otherwise arid breath of the plateau. The builders must have known this rhythm intimately, shaping their days around the contrast between the dry firmness here and the fertile banks below. When you place your palm once more against the bedrock, you notice its texture, not the smoothness of polished stone, but a surface shaped by ages of wind and sun. It is rough, but not harsh. The grains are large enough to register clearly against your skin, but small enough to suggest order within randomness. You imagine the endless years when nothing stood here but the plateau itself, when only wind, dust, and sun wrote their story across the surface. It feels fitting that such a patient ground was chosen to host the most enduring of human intentions. The wind continues, steady and low, a soft vibration against your ears. You notice how it flattens sound, carrying away sharp edges, leaving behind only tones that soothe. Your breathing aligns itself again with this current, in and out, slow, even, as though the plateau and the air are guiding you, inviting you to match their pace. You accept the invitation easily, without effort. Your body welcomes the slower rhythm. As twilight deepens, the plateau begins to cool more quickly than the stones stacked above. You feel the shift underfoot. Warmth drains quietly from the rock into the open air, leaving a refreshing neutrality behind. You think of the workers long ago, lying on the ground after hours of hauling, cutting, shaping. Their bodies, too, must have found relief in the coolness as their eyes searched the stars in silence, their thoughts drifting in ways not unlike yours now. Rest must have come easily when the ground itself offered comfort. The longer you stand here, the more you realize how inseparable the pyramid is from this surface. It is not only placed upon it, it grows out of it, belongs to it. The plateau extends beyond the visible monuments, holding others in its quiet embrace, smaller pyramids, temples, causeways, all of them connected through this single sheet of stone. You sense a network beneath your feet, a continuity that underlies the entire complex. The ground is a single, vast companion to the architecture, and without it, none of the rest could remain. The wind brings a faint murmur from the desert edge. Perhaps it is the movement of sand, perhaps the quiet wing beats of a bird making its way to a hidden roost. Whatever it is, it does not disturb. It joins the harmony. Each sound here seems to know its place, to respect the long rhythm set by stone and sky. You listen, and the listening makes you heavier, steadier, as though you too are becoming part of the plateau's surface. A thought rises, then softens. The builders must have believed that eternity could be persuaded to dwell here, only they shaped the ground and raised the stone in the right alignment. Standing where you stand, it is not difficult to understand. Eternity seems close, not in the sense of endless time, but in the sense of endless calm. The ground does not hurry. The wind does not rush. The pyramid does not change. Together, they create an atmosphere where the ordinary measurement of time seems less urgent, less pressing. You too can afford to loosen your grip on minutes and hours. You close your eyes briefly and let the air move across your skin without needing to watch. You feel the plateau beneath you, unwavering, certain. The pyramid stands just behind your closed lids, steady as breath. When you open your eyes again, the first deeper tones of night are upon you. The stars begin their slow reveal, and you'll prepare to follow the line of the pyramid's alignment toward them. The quiet, conversation between stone and sky that waits in the next step of the journey. You lift your gaze slowly now, guided not by the ground, but by the lines that rise out of it. The pyramid, as you sense more clearly, is not only massive, but precise. Its sides rest in deliberate conversation with the four directions of the world. You step back a little, enough to see the edges stretch toward horizons you cannot reach, but which feel closer because of this alignment. Each face becomes a compass, broad and steady, pointing without words, north, south, east, west. The structure embraces them all, almost perfectly, even after thousands of years. After erosion, after missing casing stones, the angles remain astonishingly true. Here, imagine ancient surveyors standing under the same darkening sky, cords stretched, rods balanced, eyes fixed on stars. They would have waited patiently, not rushing, letting the heavens guide their lines. You can feel the patience in your own breath now, the same rhythm carried forward. The stars above begin to multiply, one by one at first, then more confidently, the sky offers its map. Long ago, this map was not decoration, but instruction. To find true north, they looked to a star that no longer marks it. A star called Thuban in the constellation Draco. Around 2500 BCE, it held that place with quiet authority. Each night, when the air cooled like this, the surveyors would watch. They would see it circle so slightly, steady enough to anchor a line, steady enough to tell them where to set their foundations. You tilt your head and imagine them sighting along a chord, eyes narrowing not from strain, but from focus, steady hands marking the earth. You walk a few steps along the base, feeling the geometry with your body. East and west stretch in parallel, one arm toward the sunrise, the other toward the fading glow where the sun has just left. The air still carries a faint warmth from the west, a trace of the day's fire. You breathe it in, balanced against the cooler air that now flows from the east, carrying hints of the desert's night. The pyramid absorbs both directions, resting calmly between them. South opens toward deeper desert, east toward the slow roll of dunes and the edge of lands where caravans once moved like measured waves. North opens toward the river, the life thread that drew people here and sustained every gesture of stone. The pyramid's placement is not random. You feel how it listens to both directions, how it mediates between the nourishment of the Nile and the silence of the desert. The four faces, together, form a still dialogue between earth and sky. You pause at a corner. Corners are places where decisions meet. This one points you directly to the horizon, where a single star seems to sit in line with the edge. Whether by chance or intention, you cannot tell, but the feeling is unmistakable. The architecture is not blind. It participates, recognizes the heavens above, and reflects them back with stone. You imagine the workers watching as night deepened, perhaps lying on their backs when labor was done, tracing constellations with a fingertip. The Milky Way would have spilled across the sky, a pale river echoing the Nile below. Between river and river, stone rose. Between horizon and horizon, the pyramid stretched its arms. The symmetry must have comforted them, even as they worked under harsh conditions. To live and toil under a sky that seemed to cooperate with your project, that is a kind of blessing. You sense that blessing lingering still. The wind at night becomes cooler now, and it slides along the pyramid's slope, as if the slope itself channels it. You notice how the angles are gentle enough to carry the air upward without obstruction. Perhaps that was not the intention, but here, now, it feels inevitable. The pyramid does not block the wind. It guides it. The sound softens as it rises, less a whistle than a sigh. You breathe in rhythm again. You think of how difficult it must have been to achieve this alignment with such accuracy. Without compasses, without modern tools, they relied on the slow turning of the stars. Each observation required waiting, and waiting required trust. The builders trusted the heavens to repeat themselves night after night. They trusted that if they marked carefully, patiently, their lines would be true. That trust is still visible. You see it in every side that holds to its direction without deviation. You feel it in every corner that meets the world without apology. Standing here, you let your mind rest in that same trust. The sky above continues to turn. The stars still wheel slowly. The pyramid remains aligned. No matter how the ages shift, you realize you need not calculate or measure. You can simply rest within the knowledge that this steadiness persists. North remains north. East remains east. The pyramid remains itself. And you, for now, are invited to remain too quiet and steady within its company. As more stars appear, you find your attention drawn, not to their variety, but to their rhythm. They emerge gently, evenly spaced, without rush. The sky reveals itself with the same calm tempo as the pyramid holds. The two mirror one another. Stone in stillness, stars in movement, both bound by geometry, both offering reassurance. You watch until your eyes soften and the sharpness of each star blurs into a soft glow. It's like distant lamps left burning in an endless night. In a little while, you will step inward, toward the stones themselves, and think about how they were cut and moved. For now, you remain on the outside, feeling the lines stretch outward, toward horizons, and upward toward stars. You let yourself align with them too. Your body, a small compass. Your breathing, a quiet measure. The pyramid waits patiently, and so do you. You turn your attention from the alignment of stars and directions down toward the matter itself, the stones that give the pyramid its shape. From a distance, they look uniform, a single continuous body. Up close, you begin to see the individuality, each block its own shade of pale, each edge weathered in its own way, each bearing the mark of centuries. The pyramid is less a single thing than a collection of countless decisions, countless movements of stone. The majority of these blocks are limestone. They came not from far, but from the plateau itself, quarried close to where they now rest. You imagine the sound of hammer against wedge, the crack as a slab loosened, the groan as it shifted. The workers would have levered it free, patient and deliberate, never in sudden rush. You can almost hear the echo still, faint in the wind that moves over the plateau. The rhythm of stone breaking would have been steady, like breath, like the heart's beat, but not all limestone is the same. The builders sought something finer, something brighter for the outer casing. That came from Tura, across the river, where quarries opened into the cliffs. The Tura limestone was smoother, whiter, able to take a polish that reflected the sun with brilliance. You imagine boats drifting across the Nile at dawn, Their cargo heavy, but their movement calm, the water parting softly around hulls, On deck, men tended ropes, their voices low, their work unhurried. Each block was destined to become a piece of the pyramid skin, a surface that would glow like snow in sunlight, dazzling to those approaching from far away. Now the casing stones are gone, removed long ago for other buildings, but you can still sense them. You pictured the pyramid not in its weathered state, but as it once was, gleaming white against the deep blue sky, the light sliding across it like water over glass. Even at night, the moon would have set it aglow, a beacon visible for miles. To stand before such brilliance must have been overwhelming. You let the image form in your mind, then let it fade, leaving only the softer, worn surface that remains, more restful, more suited to quiet contemplation. And then there is the granite. Unlike the limestone, granite came from far to the south, from Aswan, nearly 600 miles away. Its color is deep, often pink or red, speckled with black crystals that glimmer when struck by light. This was not ordinary stone. It was chosen for strength, for permanence, for the chambers at the heart of the pyramid. To move it required effort beyond imagination. Blocks weighing dozens of tons floated down the Nile on barges, the river carrying them patiently, steadily. You picture the long journey, days and nights drifting, the creak of timbers, the slap of water, the call of birds at dawn. The stone itself would have been silent, waiting to be placed in its final resting place. When you think of the granite beams above the king's chamber, you cannot help but feel the weight, literal and figurative. Each beam spans the chamber with calm authority, each one a single piece of earth carried hundreds of miles, lifted with unimaginable care, and set into position with precision. They remain there now, quiet and immovable, a ceiling of endurance. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel their heaviness pressing down, not oppressively, but like a blanket, firm and reassuring. The contrast between limestone and granite feels meaningful. Limestone is local, abundant, shaped easily into blocks of every size. Granite is distant, rare, demanding, yet brought here anyway because nothing less would suffice. Together, they form a partnership, the body of the pyramid in limestone, its heart in granite. You sense that the builders understood the symbolism, even if they did not speak of it. The ordinary and the extraordinary, the near and the far, the soft and the hard, all united in one structure, all cooperating to express something greater than themselves. As you walk along the base, you notice how the remaining blocks catch the faint starlight. The limestone reflects it softly, a pale glow that feels almost cool to the eye. If there was still granite outside, it would gleam darker, with points of light flashing like sparks. The two stones respond to the sky in their own ways, each one participating in the night differently. You find yourself comforted by this diversity, how different materials from different places can coexist in a single form without conflict. You let your thoughts drift to the quarries themselves, silent now, but once alive with activity. At Tura, workers descended into the earth, cutting blocks by torchlight, chiseling in narrow spaces, their tools ringing against stone. At Aswan, the granite quarries still show unfinished pieces, half freed from the bedrock, as though the workers simply walked away one day and never returned. You picture them pausing, wiping sweat from their brows, squinting into the sun. You pictured their voices rising in songs, the kind of rhythmic chants that make labor flow more smoothly, the kind that soften difficulty with repetition. Those songs are gone, but the stones they cut remain silent testimonies to the effort. The pyramid holds these voices in silence now. Each block is a word, a syllable in a language no longer spoken, but still present in form. When you press your hand against a stone, you are touching not just rock, but history's sentence, written in blocks rather than ink. The grammar is patient. The meaning is endurance. The message is quiet, but it is there. The night deepens. The air cools further. You imagine yourself sitting against one of these limestone giants, your back resting on its unyielding surface, your body small compared to its mass. Yet, the stone does not diminish you. Instead, it steadies you to remind you that even the most ordinary matter, lifted and placed with care, can contribute to something vast and lasting. You close your eyes and breathe with that thought. The wind continues. The pyramid remains. The stones from Plateau, from Tura, from Aswan keep their watch without words. You step back again, allowing the pyramid to settle into your vision as a whole. The stones, the alignment, the glow of the sky all remain. But now another layer begins to emerge. The geometry that lives quietly inside its proportions. The pyramid is not only massive and aligned, it is measured, its size carrying numbers hidden in its shape. These numbers are not shouted. They whisper through length, angle, and ratio, offering their presence to anyone who lingers long enough to notice. The ancient Egyptians used the cubit as their unit of measure. 1 cubit was the distance from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger, about 20 inches in modern terms. It was a human scale, born from the body itself, repeated again and again to create something far beyond the body. You imagine workers stretching cords marked in cubits, pulling them taut, checking them against rods. Okay. The rods would have been smooth, carved carefully, their ends worn shiny from countless comparisons. With such tools, they turned human proportions into monumental ones. The Great Pyramid's base stretches about 440 cubits on each side. Its height, when complete, was about 280 cubits. The ratio between them is not accidental. If you double the base and compare it to the height, you find the number pi hidden in the proportions. If you compare the height to half the base, you find the square root of 2, whether by deliberate design or by intuition carried from generations of builders. These relationships are there, resting quietly in stone. You do not need to calculate. You only need to sense that a kind of balance hums beneath the visible. As you trace the slope upward with your eyes, you notice how the angle itself feels calm. It is about 51 degrees, neither steep nor shallow. A middle path that allows the structure to rise steadily without toppling, to settle without sagging. You tilt your head, following the line, and you feel how it guides your breathing upward without effort. The angle seems to encourage contemplation, to pull the gaze skyward in a gentle arc, rather than a sudden thrust. It is geometry designed not to alarm, but to soothe. The builders likely used simple tools to achieve this. Plumb bobs, set squares, cords stretched in the sun, water-filled channels to find level. Nothing complicated, nothing beyond reach. Yet, from these tools came precision that has endured millennia. You imagine them crouching on the plateau, eye to eye with a water trench, watching the surface shimmer evenly, marking where the liquid showed true level. Their work was not rushed, okay? Each mark waited for certainty. Each certainty became a foundation. When you stand still long enough, the proportions begin to work on you too. The broad base offers stability, a sense that you cannot be shaken. The rise, measured and steady, offers aspiration without strain. The summit, now missing its capstone, still suggests completion, a point where earth and sky meet quietly. The pyramid becomes less a structure and more a lesson. Strength in breadth, balance in ratio, harmony in upward reach. You let that lesson sink into your chest, into the rhythm of your pulse. The numbers involved are large, but they remain rooted in human measure, thousands upon thousands of cubits, yet each one born from the length of an arm. This continuity comforts you, no matter how vast the pyramid becomes. It is always linked back to the scale of the human body. It is as if the builders left a reminder that the monumental is not alien. It is simply the human multiplied, extended patiently, cubit by cubit, until it becomes eternal. You picture surveyors walking the base, step by step, counting cubits, checking alignment, smoothing the ground, spewing the ground. You picture architects sketching lines in sand, rubbing them out, drawing again until proportions felt right. You picture overseers leaning on staffs, nodding at each angle, satisfied not with grandeur, but with correctness. Their satisfaction remains here, embedded in the ratios that still hold, that still speak, even if only to those who pause long enough to listen. The night deepens further, and the stars above wheel slowly, their patterns echoing the same geometry below. Constellations stretch in ratios, right angles, arcs. The builders, looking up, would have seen geometry everywhere, written in light across the sky. They brought it down to earth, into stone. You sense that exchange continuing now, the pyramid reflecting the stars reflecting the pyramid, each one offering balance, each one reassuring you that the world is ordered, not chaotic. You let your body mirror the structure for a moment, feet apart, grounding you like the base, spine rising, steady but not rigid, shoulders relaxed like the sloping sides, head upright, pointing calmly to the sky. In this posture, you feel aligned, proportioned, a living echo of the geometry around you. It's not perfection you feel, but harmony. The sense that your place within the structure of things is steady and secure. The wind carries another long breath across the plateau, brushing against the stones, brushing against you. It seems to agree with the proportions, moving evenly, predictably, not rushed. The pyramid holds its shape. The stars hold their courses. The wind holds its rhythm. And you, for this moment, are held by all three. Soon you will turn your thoughts toward the question of movement, of how such immense blocks traveled and rose into place. But for now, you linger in the calm of the measures. Cubits stretched across stone, ratios hidden in angles, geometry that speaks softly in numbers. The pyramid is both vast and exact, both overwhelming and reassuring. And within its balance, you find your own. You linger by the vast base, gazing upward, and a quiet question arrives. How did these stones, so immense, find their way here? They are not small, not light. Even the ordinary blocks weigh several tons, and the granite beams inside weigh more than most boats. To stand in their presence is to feel both awe and curiosity. Yet the pyramid does not hurry to answer. It prefers suggestion, inviting you to imagine the possibilities slowly, one by one. The most common thought drifts toward ramps. Imagine the plateau centuries ago, covered not only with half-built layers of stone, but with long earthworks rising alongside, ramps stretching outward like wide arms, their surfaces packed hard with clay and gravel. Workers dragging sledges, wooden runners groaning beneath the weight, ropes creaking, voices murmuring in rhythm. Step by step, cubit by cubit, the block moves upward. No sudden leaps, no bursts of speed, only steady progress. You can almost hear the shuffle of sandals in the dust, the hush of breath matched to the long incline. Some scholars picture straight ramps, long and monumental, stretching into the desert. Others imagine spirals wrapping the pyramid itself, hugging its form so that each block could be placed without moving too far. Both ideas have weight, carry the same mood, patience. There is no scenario in which the blocks arrived quickly, only one in which they arrived surely, steadily, with the kind of determination that repeats the same motion day after day until the structure is complete. Then your mind turns to water. In recent years, some have suggested that workers poured small amounts of water before the sledges, dampening the sand so it held firm. Without water, the sand shifts, spilling under the runners. With water, the grains cling lightly, allowing the sledge to slide with less resistance. You picture this small act, a man carrying a jar, tilting it just so, darkening a strip of sand before the sled. The block, heavy and unwilling, now glides more easily. A simple gesture transforms impossible into manageable. You breathe out slowly, feeling how even the smallest adjustment can make great weight lighter. You imagine the teams at work, perhaps 100 men gathered at the ropes, leaning in unison, their shoulders set, their bodies swaying together. Chant keeps their pace, not loud, but steady. Words simple enough to repeat endlessly without thought. The stone inches forward, a pause, a sip of water, a check of ropes, then onward again. This rhythm becomes the day. The day becomes the weeks. The weeks become decades. Out of such patience, a pyramid rises. Your mind drifts further to the wooden sledges themselves. They would have been strong, crafted from acacia or imported cedar, smooth with care. Runners hardened with resin. Each one carried not only stone, but the trust of those who pulled it. The sledge could not splinter. The rope could not snap. The workers depended on these tools as much as on their own strength. You imagine the craftsman shaping a new runner, smoothing its curve, testing its slide over packed earth. His skill is quiet, but without it, nothing would move. There is also the possibility of levers and counterweights, small teams nudging blocks into position with wedges of wood, raising them step by step. You picture two men crouched close, inserting a lever under the edge, pressing downward with their full weight until the stone tilts just enough. Another slips a pebble, a fragment, beneath. The block rests a fraction higher. They repeat, slowly, without hurry. The process is patient, almost meditative, a conversation between stone and tool. You can feel how such quiet persistence might lift mountains. The air grows cooler as night deepens, and you realize the workers likely preferred hours like these. The sun was harsh, the heat merciless. At dawn and dusk, the air softened, the wind more forgiving. You imagine lines of men setting out as the first light spread, their shadows long, their tasks clear. By midday they rested, sheltered, perhaps sleeping in the shade of half-built walls. Then, as evening came, they returned to their ropes and sledges, the cooler air helping them last longer. The rhythm of labor matched the rhythm of the desert itself. Patience is the real engine behind the pyramid. Not ramps alone, not sledges, not water, but patience multiplied across generations. Some men began to work knowing they would never see its completion. They dragged blocks, not for themselves, but for those who would come after. The pyramid absorbs their patience, stone by stone. You feel it now, standing here. Its weight is not only physical, but temporal. It is the weight of countless slow days layered into eternity. You run your hand over one block, feeling the slight irregularities of its surface. This stone, to once moved, once scraped across sand, once rocked on a sledge, has been still for thousands of years, but it remembers motion. You imagine the dust rising from its passage, the sweat of those who guided it, the pause when it finally came to rest in its place. That moment of arrival remains, even now. The stone has not forgotten. The pyramid does not reveal which method was used. Straight ramp, spiral ramp, levers, water, perhaps all of them at different times for different stones. The mystery itself becomes soothing. You are not required to solve it. You are invited only to consider, to drift among possibilities, to feel how each one carries the same spirit. Slow, steady, human persistence. That spirit is enough. As the wind brushes softly against your face, you feel your own body relax into the same rhythm. You too move through your days, one task at a time, one step at a time. Great weights shift not through force, but through patience. The pyramid whispers this lesson through its silence. Cue, listen, and you accept it. You step away from the towering stones, letting your thoughts drift down the slope of the plateau toward a quieter place. Just south of the pyramids lies the ghost of a village, not for kings, not for priests, but for workers. To imagine the pyramid only as stone is to miss half the story. The people who carried, cut, and placed those stones also lived, ate, laughed, and rested here. Their village, though mostly gone, still lingers in the air if you allow yourself to picture it slowly. The village was not chaotic. It was planned, as carefully in its way as the pyramid itself. Long galleries lined up in rows, narrow but long, each one sheltering groups of laborers. Mud brick walls, whitewashed to reflect the sun, kept the interiors cool during the day. The floors were packed earth, swept regularly, straw mats spread across them, a place to stretch out after hours of hauling stone. You imagine men reclining side by side, their shoulders dusty, their voices low, sharing jokes or small fragments of song. The air inside heavy with the smell of sweat and straw, but also with the comforting closeness of companionship. Bread was their main food, coarse loaves, baked daily in clay ovens, their crusts hard, their interiors dense. The bread was not soft like you might expect today. It was gritty, often flecked with sand that had worked its way into the flour. Teeth wore down quickly on such fare, but it filled the stomach and gave energy for labor. Beside bread came beer, not strong, but nourishing, thick like porridge. brewed from barley. Workers drank it in large amounts, not to become intoxicated, but to hydrate, to replace what the desert sun pulled from them. The taste was earthy, sour, familiar. To imagine the village is to imagine that smell. Bread baking, beer brewing, steam rising gently into the dry air. Meat, too, was present, though not daily. Cattle and sheep were herded in for slaughter, and bones found in the excavations tell us the workers ate better than one might assume. Feasts must have marked the completion of tasks or the arrival of visiting officials. On such days, fires would have burned hotter, spits turning, fat dripping into flames. The sound of laughter would have joined the crackle, the mood lighter, the hardship briefly forgotten. Each day followed a rhythm. At dawn, as the horizon brightened and the plateau cooled, workers would rise. They tied simple kilts around their waists, tightened cords on their sandals. Some shoulder tools, chisels, mallets, copper blades sharpened in the forges. Others walked directly to the quarries, their tasks already set. The walk itself was steady, a procession of men heading toward their place in history, though to them it was simply another day of labor. The sun climbed, their bodies strained, their voices lifted in chants that paced the ropes. By midday, when the heat pressed down too fiercely, they rested in the shade, perhaps napping, perhaps chewing dates, drinking beer in measured gulps. Then, when the light softened again, they returned to their ropes and sledges, pushing on until the day dimmed. In the evening, the village came alive. Fires lit, food passed, laughter rose. Some men played small flutes, their notes high and wandering. Others tapped rhythms on drums made from stretched hide. Music drifted between the mud brick walls, carried on the same desert wind that brushed across the pyramid. The music was not grand, but it was enough. Enough to lift spirits, enough to make exhaustion gentler. You picture yourself seated among them, the night air cool, the bread warm, the beer thick. The voices around you, tired but content. The pyramid loomed above, but here, in the village, life felt smaller, more intimate. The workers were not slaves in chains, as once imagined, but conscripted laborers. Farmers whose fields lay dormant when the Nile flooded. When water covered their land, they had no crops to tend, so they gave their time to the state. In exchange, they received food, lodging, and clothing. For many, it was duty, but also pride. To build the king's eternal house was to participate in something larger than a season as harvest. You sense that pride in the remnants of their village, in the neat rows of galleries, in the traces of ovens and breweries, in the careful planning of streets. At night, after the music faded, the village grew still. Men lay on mats, their bodies sore, their minds perhaps drifting between memories of their families and the day's labors. Outside, the wind whispered across the plateau, carrying grains of sand that tapped softly against walls. Dogs padded between shadows, guarding scraps. The pyramid, always present, watched silently. In sleep, the men became part of its foundation too, their dreams joining the structure that rose above them. You let yourself imagine lying there as one of them, your back pressed to the mat, the air cool against your skin, the faint glow of the moon slipping through the doorway. You hear the slow breathing of companions beside you, a collective rhythm of rest. Beyond the wall, the pyramid rises step by step into the stars, but you do not need to look at it. You know it is there, waiting, steady. Cute your eyes, as they did, and let the fatigue of work become the comfort of sleep. As you leave the workers' village, in your imagination, your steps draw you east, toward another figure carved not from stacked blocks, but from the living stone of the plateau itself. The great Sphinx lies stretched along the sand, its body low and long, its head lifted, watching as it has always watched. If the pyramids are mountains shaped by human hands, then the Sphinx is a presence. Half earth, half sky, half lion, half man. To approach it is to feel another kind of silence, heavier, but also strangely calm. The Sphinx does not rush into view. First, you see the lines of its paws, stretched forward, resting upon the ground, as if in eternal repose. Then the chest, wide and steady, carved with grooves that echo the desert's own layers. And finally, the head rises, disproportionately small compared to the body, yet full of presence. Its eyes, weathered but still intent, gaze beyond you as though its attention lies far past your arrival. You feel almost as if you are passing through its dream, not the other way around. The stone itself is the same bedrock as the plateau, but softened by centuries of wind and sand. The body shows the wear most clearly, flanks eroded, surface smoothed, ridges softened. The head, harder limestone, endures more firmly, holding detail even now. You notice how this difference creates a rhythm, body dissolving back into earth, head clinging to form. Together, they tell a story of time's uneven touch, a story as old as stone itself. No one knows with certainty who the Sphinx was meant to represent. Many believe it bears the features of Kafir, the pharaoh whose pyramid rises just behind. Others suggest older origins, a figure whose meaning was already ancient, even to the pyramid builders. You do not need to choose. The uncertainty itself is soothing. The Sphinx asks no answer of you, simply rests, blending human intention with natural form, a riddle embodied in stone. You imagine the work of carving it, men descending into the bedrock with chisels and copper saws, cutting trenches to free the outline, dust rising in clouds, settling in their hair and on their skin, the shapes slowly emerging, first paws, then body, then head. Like the pyramid, built stone upon stone, the Sphinx was revealed by subtraction, by removing what was unnecessary until the figure appeared. There is a quiet metaphor in that. Sometimes the way forward is not to add, but to take away, until what is essential shows itself. The Sphinx has watched centuries pass. Pharaohs rose and fell, dynasties shifted, foreign armies marched, sandstorms buried and revealed. Through it all, the Sphinx remained patient. You sense that patience as you stand before it now. It does not hurry to change, does not resist the wearing down of wind. It accepts erosion as part of its story. Even when buried to its neck in sand for long centuries, it waited calmly until people cleared it again. You feel that kind of patience moving into you, as though your own worries might also be buried and uncovered without fear. The face, though damaged, still holds expression. The nose is gone, perhaps chiseled away, perhaps weathered. No one can be certain. The lips curve in a faint suggestion of calm, neither smiling nor frowning, but resting somewhere in between. The eyes, though softened, remain focused, directed outward into the horizon. You cannot quite meet their gaze. It seems to pass through you, searching something far away. That distance is strangely comforting. You do not have to be the center of attention. The Sphinx does not demand it. You are free simply to be present around its paws. Once, chapels stood, offerings were made, incense burned, priests whispered prayers. The Sphinx was not only a guardian, but a participant in ritual. Now, those chapels are gone, but the sense of sanctity remains. Standing before it, you feel not small, but included, as if this ancient guardian has made room for you too, just as it has made room for all who came before. Night deepens, and the moon begins to rise higher, silvering the long back of the Sphinx. Its body gleams faintly, not in brilliance, but in quiet outline. You imagine ancient travelers arriving at dusk, torches flickering, the Sphinx before them, glowing pale under the moon. They must have felt what you feel now. Awe, not from spectacle, but from calmness too vast to measure. The Sphinx does not move. It never has, never will. Yet its stillness is alive, a stillness that gathers centuries within it. You let yourself mirror that posture, your own body quiet, your breath steady, your gaze soft. To be still, you realize, is also to endure. You need not hurry, need not solve, need not decide. You can simply be, as the Sphinx has always been, watching slow centuries pass with patience. You return in thought to the pyramid itself, now seen through the lens of what is missing. What you see today, the stepped, weathered core, is not how the monument once looked. Long ago, the entire surface gleamed with smooth, polished limestone casing stones. To imagine them is to transform the pyramid into something almost unrecognizable. Not rugged, but radiant. Not muted, but dazzling. The casing stones came from Tura, the fine white limestone across the Nile. They were cut with care, their faces smooth until they reflected the sun like mirrors of stone. Each block was measured so precisely that joints were thinner than a fingernail, fitting together with quiet perfection. Once set, the pyramid sides would have appeared seamless, continuous planes of brightness. No shadows caught between stones, no steps to break the line, only a vast slope rising unbroken toward the capstone. At dawn, when the first light struck, the pyramid must have flared like fire. Its white skin caught the sun and scattered it, a beacon seen from miles across the desert. Farmers in distant fields, sailors along the river, caravans approaching from dry roads, all would have lifted their eyes to see it gleam. Even by moonlight, the casing shone softly, a pale presence in the dark, reminding all who saw it of permanence and power. You close your eyes a moment and picture that radiance, a mountain of light slowly warming to gold as the day began. Time, however, is patient, and people are resourceful. Over centuries, much of the casing was stripped away, reused for mosques and buildings in nearby Cairo. Earthquakes loosened blocks, and scavengers carted them off. What remains now are the rougher core stones, practical but unfinished, a skeleton of what once was. Yet, if you look closely at the base, a few casing stones still cling, polished faces gleaming faintly even after millennia. You run your hand across one in your mind, feeling the smoothness unlike any other stone on the plateau. It is like touching silence, a silence planned and executed by hands long gone. The capstone, too, is missing, called the pyramidion. It would have been the final piece, a small but vital crown. Some believe it was covered in electrum, a gold-silver alloy that caught the sun even more fiercely than limestone. Imagine that point flashing at midday, a spark against the sky, connecting heaven and earth in a single stroke of brilliance. To stand below it must have been overwhelming, the light itself a form of architecture. The lost sheen alters how we experience the pyramid now. The worn core feels approachable, its depths climbable, its texture relatable. The smooth casing, by contrast, would have made it forbidding, untouchable, like a polished blade, too sharp for the hand. Perhaps that was the intention, to make the king's eternal house something apart. Not to be scaled, not to be defaced, but to remain perfect. In that perfection, all would rise naturally, the monument less a building than a celestial form, too bright to ignore. And yet, there is something gentle in its loss. The pyramid today, stripped of its sheen, feels calmer. Its light no longer dazzles, but comforts. Surface no longer blinds, but welcomes. You can see the joints, the steps, the individuality of each block. You can imagine the workers more clearly, sense their effort more directly. The monument has aged into humility, a giant softened by time. Its radiance may be gone, but in its place comes a deeper quiet. You picture a morning in ancient times, the sun breaking over the horizon, catching the pyramid's east face first. A blaze of white sears the air, scattering into the eyes of all who look. Priests at nearby temples bow, their bodies small against the glowing mass. The king himself, still living, might have watched from a boat on the river, his face warmed by the brilliance meant to carry his name into eternity. That glow was not just beauty, It was power, a statement of permanence, an assertion that the sun itself served the king. You let that image rise fully, then let it fade, leaving only the weathered surface before you, patient and kind. The casing stones remind you of something else, that perfection is not eternal. Even the most polished surfaces yield to time, to earthquakes, to human need. The brilliance fades, the sheen is borrowed for other uses, and what remains is the core, rough but enduring. You think of your own life, of moments once polished, once radiant, now softened, and you realize that this softening is not loss alone. It is also survival. The pyramid does not lament its missing casing. Stand still, offering comfort in what remains. As the night deepens, you feel the absence of the sheen as part of the present beauty. The pyramid does not blind you. It lets you look directly at its form, lets you see the stars behind it, lets you rest without strain. What was once dazzling has become soothing. You sit with that thought, letting it fold over you like the desert wind. As you stand before the pyramid, your eyes move upward along the north face. Somewhere above the ground, set slightly off the true center, lies the original entrance, a dark slit once concealed behind smooth casing stones. Now, without the polished surface, it shows more plainly, a triangular notch leading into shadow. It is a quiet reminder that the pyramid is not only exterior, but interior. Beneath the stone mass lies a world of passages, chambers, and air that has waited in cool stillness for thousands of years. You picture the ancient day when workers first cut into this face. Keen, they chiseled an opening just large enough to crawl through, angled carefully so the passage sloped downward. The stone around them groaned faintly as it adjusted to the removal, but soon the way was clear. That passage still exists, a narrow tunnel descending at a steady angle deep into the bedrock below. To enter it is to leave the desert air and step into silence. Inside, the temperature drops almost immediately. The thick stone insulates you from the heat of the day, replacing it with a dry, cool calm. Your footsteps echo against the floor, a soft but distinct sound, as though the pyramid itself is listening. The walls press close, smooth in places, rough in others. Each chisel mark a memory left by ancient hands. The air is still. Dust drifts slowly, illuminated by the faintest trickle of light from behind. Ahead, darkness deepens. The descending passage stretches long, straight, unwavering. It feels less like a corridor than a slow slide into the earth's quiet heart. Each step downward brings you further from the plateau, further from wind and sky. You feel the weight of the pyramid above, pressing not dangerously, but firmly, like a protective cover. The stillness grows heavier with each step until it seems to cradle you entirely. The passage leads eventually to the so-called subterranean chamber, unfinished and rough-hewn, cut deep into the bedrock. You pause before imagining that space, letting the descent itself hold your focus. For the builders, this downward path may have symbolized the journey of the soul into the underworld, the passage from life into the unseen. For you, it becomes a meditative drift, each step a letting go, each downward slope a loosening of thought. You do not resist, you let the descent carry you. Above the original entrance lies another, forced centuries later by treasure seekers. Their tunnel cuts awkwardly into the face, rough and direct, bypassing the hidden descending corridor. You picture them hacking at night, torches spitting, dust choking their lungs. Theirs was not a journey of patience, but of urgency. Yet even they, with their noisy invasion, could not undo the calm of the original design. The pyramid absorbed their effort as it has absorbed all intrusions, quietly, without complaint, waiting for stillness to return. You imagine what it must have been like for the very first to enter the passage when it was new, smooth casing, still bright outside, incense curling in the temples nearby. The pharaoh's priests stepping into the cool dark. They must have carried oil lamps, their flames wavering against polished walls. golden reflections sliding into shadow. With each step downward, the world above grew more distant, and the world of eternity drew nearer. The air they breathed was the same air you imagine now, unchanged, timeless, carrying nothing but the faint scent of stone. The entrance itself, hidden once by casing, was never meant for ordinary eyes. It was reserved, sacred, a threshold between seen and unseen. Stand before it is to recognize that thresholds are not loud. They are quiet, unassuming, waiting to be noticed only by those who are meant to pass. You reflect on thresholds in your own life, the small openings that led into new chapters, often unnoticed until you stepped through. The pyramid's entrance feels like such a moment, eternalized in stone. You step back in thought, away from the notch, back into the desert air. The pyramid's face looms once more, its blocks broad and silent. Yet now you sense the interior. You know that behind those stones lies coolness, darkness, a passage descending steadily. That knowledge changes the way you see the exterior. It is no longer just surface. It is depth, hidden but certain. Night gathers fully around the plateau. Stars wheel overhead. The wind continues its low song, and the pyramid holds its secrets as it always has. You breathe, imagining the entrance behind you, the descending passage waiting. You let its coolness drift into your thoughts, calming them, slowing them, guiding them gently downward. You carry the thought of the cool, descending passage with you. But now your imagination turns upward to another space within the pyramid, one that feels very different. The grand gallery does not press you downward into bedrock. Instead, it opens above you, stretching long and high, its walls narrowing as they rise. To picture it is to feel both wonder and calm, as if you stepped into the slow inhalation of the pyramid itself. The gallery begins after a small, low passage where you must crouch. Then, suddenly, the ceiling lifts, the walls pull back, and you find yourself in a space nearly 30 feet high. The contrast is striking, yet not overwhelming. The gallery does not shout its size. It reveals it gradually, step by step, as you walk along its polished limestone floor. The incline is steady, rising toward the king's chamber far above. But the rise is gentle enough to feel like climbing through breath itself, slow, continuous, unbroken. The walls of the grand gallery lean inward in corbelled steps. Each layer projects slightly closer than the one below, narrowing the corridor as it ascends. The effect is subtle, like the inside of a giant funnel carved from stone. Your eyes follow the slope upward, tracing the angles until they meet the ceiling far above. You feel enclosed, but not trapped. Instead, the space seems to guide you forward, as if ushering you towards something important, but in no rush. The gallery prefers patience. Your footsteps here would sound different. In the lower passages, echoes are muffled, pressed flat by close walls. In the grand gallery, sound climbs with you, reverberating along its length. A cough, a shuffle, a whispered word, all would stretch farther than you intended. Filling the air with gentle persistence, you imagine ancient workers moving through with torches, its flames flickering against walls, their voices rising in chants to match their climb. The sound of effort softened, transformed by the architecture into something almost musical. Along the walls, shallow slots run parallel, cut into the stone. Some believe these were for beams or scaffolding, supports for the placement of blocks, or perhaps for the sliding of stones into position. Whatever their function, they add rhythm to the corridor, repeating again and again like a quiet heartbeat in stone. You picture wooden beams once fitted there, ropes tied, sledges guided upward. The gallery then was not only ceremonial but practical, an artery through which the pyramid was constructed, one block at a time. The incline itself asks for care. As you walk upward in thought, you notice how the slope presses your calves, how your balance shifts. In ancient times, perhaps wooden ramps were laid here, or ropes stretched to guide the hauling of granite beams. You imagine the beams themselves, massive and unyielding, sliding upward inch by inch. Workers bracing ropes, leaning into the weight. Sweat must have dampened the air. Torches hissed as drops fell on flames, but the rhythm endured. Pull, pause, pull again. Every movement deliberate, every pause accepted. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. But even stripped of its workaday function, the Grand Gallery feels ceremonial. To ascend it is to leave ordinary space behind. You move through shadow and torchlight, your footsteps echoing the ceiling, far above, drawing your gaze upward without effort. It feels less like a corridor and more like a passage between worlds. Perhaps that was its purpose too, to prepare the soul for the chamber ahead, to ease the transition from earth to eternity. You pause midway in your imagination, looking back down the slope. The descending passage lies far below, hidden now, but you know it leads downward into the earth. Ahead lies ascent, the king's chamber waiting. Between them, here in the Grand Gallery, you stand in balance, not yet beneath, not yet above, but in the quiet in between. The pyramid seems to breathe around you, one long inhalation held across millennia. You breathe with it, steady, unhurried. Your hand grazes the wall, the stone cool and faintly rough. Each block is massive, carefully placed, joints tight enough to deny even a slip of paper. You sense the patience of the masons who fitted them, the slow care with which each angle was checked, each layer set. They were not building for the day or the year. They were building for eternity. And eternity, as you feel now, prefers calm, prefers patience, prefers balance. When you close your eyes, you hear the gallery as much as you see it. The echoes rise and fall. The slope carries you upward in thought. And the narrow ceiling above presses your awareness toward stillness. You allow yourself to walk the length, step by careful step, until the gallery narrows at its far end. There, a low doorway waits, leading into the king's chamber. But for now, you remain in the gallery itself, breathing with its long breath, feeling how the pyramid holds silence like a vessel. At the end of the Grand Gallery, the path narrows again. You crouch, step carefully, and then rise into a chamber unlike any other inside the pyramid, the king's chamber. It is not grand in decoration. No paint, no carvings, no golden panels line the walls. Instead, it is a room of pure geometry, stark and simple, built from blocks of deep Aswan granite. The simplicity itself is what makes it powerful. You step inside and feel the change immediately. The air heavier, the silence deeper, the sense of weight undeniable. The chamber is rectangular, its walls formed by massive granite blocks fitted so precisely that the joints are nearly invisible. Each block weighs dozens of tons, yet together they rest in perfect alignment. Their surface is polished just enough to feel smooth against your hand. The stone is dark compared to the limestone of the passages. It absorbs light rather than reflecting it, creating a mood of solemn calm. You sense that here, in this inner sanctum, the pyramid draws inward, away from brilliance, into quiet endurance. At the center rests the granite sarcophagus. It is plain, unadorned, unfinished in some places, as though the builders valued presence more than polish. The lid is gone, perhaps broken open long ago, but the box remains, its mass undeniable. If you imagine it not as a coffin in the ordinary sense, but as a vessel, a symbol, a marker of permanence. To stand near it is to feel the human scale again. The idea that all this stone, all this labor, was ultimately for one body, one journey into eternity. But the chamber's most striking feature lies not in what you see, but in what you sense above. Hidden within the pyramid are 5 spaces, one atop another, stacked above the chamber. These are the relieving chambers, designed to carry the weight of millions of tons of stone away from the roof below. Massive granite beams span each chamber, their length stretching across like ribs of a giant. They bear the load in silence, distributing the pressure, ensuring the chamber beneath remains intact. You cannot see them from where you stand, but you feel them, the quiet heaviness pressing downward yet held in balance. The weight is immense. Stones larger than ships lifted and set with precision so fine they have endured 4,500 years. Imagine the effort. Granite floated down the Nile, hauled across the plateau, raised block by block into the pyramid's heart. Then, with unimaginable patience, workers slid each beam into place above this chamber, layering them in calm succession. You picture them pausing after each beam, resting in the torchlight, wiping dust from their brows, listening to the silence that followed. That silence remains heavy but reassuring, like a long hand resting steadily on your shoulder. Inside the chamber, sound behaves differently. If you speak, your voice does not echo in the ordinary way. Instead, the granite seems to hold the sound, resonating faintly, as though the room itself has a voice. Some who have stood there describe humming, or vibrations that linger longer than expected. You imagine striking one block lightly, the note rising deep and low, carried through the stone. The pyramid is not just architecture. It is also instrument, tuned not by accident, but by design. You walk slowly around the chamber in your mind. Each step sounds against the floor with quiet insistence, okay? Each block of granite you pass reminds you of endurance, of patience, of scale beyond comprehension. The walls are bare, yet in their barrenness they speak more loudly than any inscription. They remind you that eternity does not require ornament. It requires only stillness and the will to remain. The sarcophagus at the center anchors the room. Its rough edges and broken state do not diminish its presence. Instead, they emphasize survival. It has endured looting, chisels, time, and yet it remains immovable. You picture lowering your hand to its edge, the stone cool and grainy, crystals of quartz and feldspar catching faint glints of light. You imagine the weight that once pressed against it, the body it once held, the rituals that surrounded it. All of that is gone, but the vessel remains, carrying memory without words. You think of the relieving chambers again, those silent guardians above. Without them, the king's chamber would have collapsed under the pyramid's weight. With them, it endures. There is a lesson in that, too. To carry great burdens, one must build spaces of relief, hidden chambers where weight can be shifted, spread, absorbed. Okay? The builders knew this, and so the chamber survives. You let the lesson settle. Endurance is not stubbornness alone, but balance, distribution, patience. The chamber is dark, the air cool, the silence profound. Yet you do not feel fear here. You feel steadiness. The pyramid does not intimidate from within. It reassures. Its weight above is not threatening, it's protective. Realize the builders must have intended this, not terror, but calm. The sense that the king, and by extension, all who follow, rest within stone that will never abandon them. You stand a while longer, breathing with the room, letting its granite mass quiet your own thoughts. Outside, the desert wind continues. Above, stars wheel slowly, but here, in the heart of the pyramid, only stillness remains. You accept it and let it hold you. From the king's chamber, your thoughts drift upward again, toward details so small they could almost be overlooked. The narrow shafts, wider than a handspan, that cut through the walls of the pyramid and stretch out toward the sky. To stand in the chamber and imagine them is to realize that even within this mountain of stone, the builders carved tiny passages, thin lines of connection between the inner silence and the outer stars. The shafts are straight and narrow, angled upward at precise degrees. To leave the king's chamber, one heading north, one south. Two others, smaller and steeper, depart from the queen's chamber below. None are large enough for a person to pass through. They are not corridors. They are more like breadths of stone, channels no wider than an arm, carved with patient accuracy through hundreds of feet of masonry. Their purpose has puzzled visitors for centuries, but their presence is certain. They are there, and they point outward. The southern shaft of the king's chamber rises toward where Orion's belt would have appeared around the time of construction. The northern shaft aims toward what was then the pole star, Thuban in Draco. In the queen's chamber, the southern shaft points toward Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, while the northern one once aligned with other northern constellations. Whether by design or coincidence, these alignments invite quiet speculation. You imagine priests long ago standing within the chamber, aware that narrow lines of sight connected the pharaoh's eternal resting place to the sky itself. The shafts are sometimes called air channels, but they were not built for ventilation in the practical sense. The pyramid is sealed too tightly, the shafts too small for useful airflow. Instead, they seem symbolic, routes for the soul, paths of light, tiny corridors through which eternity could pass. You imagine a sliver of starlight slipping through one at night, touching the granite within, connecting chamber and cosmos in a silent thread. Even if no light ever truly pierced them, the idea itself feels enough. The shafts suggest that the pyramid was not only about weight and earth, but also about sky and eternity. Explorers have sent cameras into the shafts, watching them stretch on in narrow silence. Some end abruptly in small limestone doors, complete with copper fittings, still closed after thousands of years. Others reach the exterior. The mystery deepens rather than resolves. Were the doors symbolic or practical? Did they hold offerings, or were they purely spiritual? You do not need to decide. The shafts themselves are enough, slim, patient, unchanging, pointing outward while the rest of the pyramid holds inward. You stand in thought, imagining the process of carving them. Workers must have measured carefully, chiseling in confined space, guiding the angle without deviation. Each stroke of the chisel echoed softly inside, each flake of stone carried away by hand. Progress would have been slow, but steady, like a breath drawn carefully over hours. In all four passages, no one would ever walk, no one would ever see. The effort itself suggests devotion, a belief that eternity rests not in spectacle, but in precision. The shafts whisper another lesson. Connection matters. Even the most solid structure, even the heaviest monument, needs channels that open outward. Without them, the pyramid would be complete in mass, but closed in meaning. With them, it becomes not just a tomb, but a conversation between earth and sky. You feel that in your own breath, the need for channels, for openings, for air and light to move freely. The builders knew it too. They gave their monument lungs. At night, when the stars appear in slow rotation, you imagine aligning yourself with one of the shafts in thought. You close your eyes, breathe slowly, and picture a narrow line stretching from your chest into the heavens, joining a star's distant glow. The line is thin, but unbreakable. Connects not through noise or speed, but through stillness. The stars, after all, are patient. They wait for you, as they waited for the builders, as they will wait long after. The shafts remain hidden yet constant, pointing to constellations that have drifted over the millennia. The sky moves, but the pyramid does not. The alignments that were once exact are now approximate, yet the intention holds. The message, even blurred, is still legible. The king belonged to eternity, 2 stars, to something beyond the desert. And so do you in your own small way, whenever you lift your gaze into the night and let it rest there. You open your eyes again in thought, returning to the granite chamber, the weight of stone around you. The shafts are invisible from here, but you feel them nonetheless, like faint arteries of light running outward. The pyramid breathes through them, not in air, but in meaning, and with that awareness, your own breathing slows once more, matching the rhythm of silence that the shafts have carried for thousands of years. When you step back from the pyramid's face and let your eyes wander across the plateau, you find another element often overlooked. The great boat pits, carved into the rock and once filled with full-sized wooden vessels. They remind you that the pyramid was never just about stone. It was also about journeys, across water, across desert, across the threshold into eternity. Near the Great Pyramid, archaeologists discovered long, rectangular trenches, some more than 100 feet in length. Inside, dismantled timbers of cedar and acacia were carefully stacked, preserved in darkness for thousands of years. When reconstructed, one boat stretched over 140 feet, its prow rising gracefully, its hull broad and strong. You imagine it as it once was, floating gently on the Nile, the water dark and slow beneath it, oars dipping in rhythm. Its timbers creaked softly, ropes hummed under strain, and the smell of resin and fresh water mingled in the air. Even at rest, the boat carried the suggestion of movement. The purpose of these vessels was not ordinary transport. They were ritual boats, solar boats, meant to carry the pharaoh-esque spirit across the heavens, just as earthly boats carried him along the Nile. The sun god Ra was believed to sail his bark across the sky each day and through the underworld at night. By burying boats beside the pyramid, the builders ensured the king could join that eternal voyage. You pause with that image, the spirit of the pharaoh setting out on a cosmic river. Oars gliding through starlight, the prow slicing through eternity. The connection to the Nile is clear. In life, the river was the artery of Egypt. All stone, all timber, all grain moved along it. Without the Nile, the pyramid could not exist. Quarried limestone crossed its waters. Granite floated down from Aswan. Fine cedar timbers sailed in from Lebanon. You picture processions of boats moving steadily downstream, barges laden with stone, smaller craft carrying workers and provisions, priests chanting as they approached Giza. The river reflected sky and temple alike, its surface a mirror of heaven. To move upon it was to move between worlds. Ceremonial processions would have wound their way from the Nile to the pyramid. Causeways stretched from the valley temples by the river up to the plateau. Along them, priests carried offerings. Music drifted from sistrums and drums. Incense curled into the air. You imagine the sound of sandals on limestone pavement, the rhythm of chants rising against the desert silence, the smell of burning resin sweet in the wind. The boat pits near the pyramid stood ready, silent witnesses to these processions, their timbers sleeping beneath the sand. The solar boats themselves were marvels of construction. No nails held them together. Instead, planks were lashed with ropes of twisted grass, seams sealed with resin. This allowed the wood to flex and breathe with the water. You picture a shipwright smoothing a cedar plank with a stone adze, his strokes long and steady, shavings curling at his feet. Another worker threads rope through drilled holes, his fingers moving surely, knot by knot, until timber and rope together become stronger than either alone. Their patience was the same patience carried into stone, just expressed in wood. Standing near one of the pits, in thought, you sense not absence, but potential. The pit is empty, but it holds the shape of a journey. It is a waiting place, a reminder that movement lies beyond stillness. Even the pyramid, so solid, needed its complement. Vessels for travel, reminders of fluidity. Eternity was not only to remain, it was also to sail, to drift, to voyage among the stars. The boats balanced the stone, water balancing earth, motion balancing mass. You let your imagination drift with one of these vessels, leaves the bank of the Nile at dusk, rowers pulling gently, their oars dipping in unison. The ripples spreading outward and fading. The sun has set, but the river glows with afterlight, the first stars trembling on the surface. Priests sing low hymns, their voices carried by the water. The boat glides toward the causeway, toward the waiting pyramid. In this vision, the transition from river to plateau feels seamless. Water becomes stone. Journey becomes rest. Yet both belong to the same continuum. When you return to the present, you see the boat pits not as empty trenches, but as echoes. They remind you that even the most enduring monument acknowledges the need for passage, for transition. The pyramid holds, but the boats move. Together, they complete the circle. One to remain, one to travel. You breathe in slowly, exhale, and feel the balance between stillness and motion settle in your chest. The desert wind stirs again, brushing across the plateau like water across the hull of a boat. From the plateau, your thoughts travel down the slope, following the line of the ancient causeways that once linked pyramid to valley. At their ends stood the mortuary and valley temples, stone gateways between the world of the living and the silence of eternity. To imagine them is to see the pyramid not as an isolated mountain, but as the culmination of a journey, a destination prepared with care and ceremony. The valley temple stood closest to the Nile, where the river's edge once lapped higher than it does today. Boats carrying the pharaoh's body or offerings would dock there, their hulls rocking gently in the current. Priests stepped ashore, their linen garments brushing softly against their legs, their hands holding jars of oil, bundles of incense, baskets of bread and beer. The temple itself was built of massive limestone blocks, its walls cool and plain, but within it carried weight beyond appearance. It was the threshold. To pass through its doors was to move from river to ritual, from the everyday flow of life into the measured stillness of eternity. From the valley temple, a paved causeway stretched upward, enclosed by walls, decorated once with carvings and painted scenes. Light filtered through narrow openings, illuminating reliefs of priests, gods, and the pharaoh himself in timeless poses. You picture walking there at dawn, the air heavy with incense, the shuffle of many feet rising in steady rhythm. The causeway was not hurried, was a slow corridor, inviting each step to be deliberate, each breath to match the measured pace of ceremony. At its far end waited the mortuary temple, set against the pyramid's very base. The mortuary temple was the place of offerings, where priests tended daily rites long after the pharaoh's burial. Here, fires burned low, oils were poured, bread and beer laid on stone altars. Statues of the king watched from dim corners, their faces serene, their presence unchanging. The rooms were not vast, but they were steady, built for repetition, ritual after ritual, year after year. In their persistence, you sensed the pyramid's true function, not only a tomb, but a machine of memory, designed to keep the king's name alive through endless acts of devotion. You imagine the sound of those rites, voices chanting in unison, the crackle of fire as resin burned, the hollow sound of a jar tilted, liquid splashing softly onto stone. Outside, the desert wind continued its own chant, carrying sand along the walls, brushing against the temple's outer stones. Inside, the priests moved calmly, their gestures practiced, their voices low, each one another thread, tying the present to eternity. The temples, like the boat pits, remind you that the pyramid was part of a larger system, not just a monument standing alone, but the final stop in a carefully choreographed journey. From river to valley temple, from valley to mortuary temple, from mortuary temple into the pyramid itself. Each stage slowed time, drawing life toward stillness, guiding the soul step by step. The architecture itself was ritual, not only the actions within it. Even in ruin, the temples hold their calm. Their walls, now broken, their roofs fallen, they still trace the shape of processions, the direction of movement. You imagine standing in one, the sun overhead, the air hot, but the space still hushed, as if remembering the voices that once filled it. The stone holds that memory quietly, the way the pyramid holds the memory of its builders. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is lost. The corridor between valley and mortuary temples also mirrors your own breathing. Inhale the river's freshness, the arrival of life. Exhale the offering, the letting go, the surrender into silence. The pyramid, waiting at the far end, becomes the final pause, the long-held breath that never releases. You feel it in your chest, the rhythm slowing, the stillness deepening, the calm expanding. You step back from the image, returning in thought to the plateau, the pyramid looming once more. Yet now you sense the pathways that once connected it. River, boat, temple, causeway, offering, chamber. Each stage steady, each transition gentle. The pyramid was never abrupt. It was always a process, a corridor of calm that carried the soul into eternity as smoothly as the Nile carried boats downstream. You leave the mortuary temple in thought and return to the pyramid itself, but this time not as a builder or priest. You imagine it centuries later, already old, when curious eyes and restless hands began to wander through its passages. The pyramid was never only a sealed tomb, it became, slowly, a place of visits, sometimes reverent, sometimes intrusive, always leaving traces. Deep inside the king's chamber, faint markings in red paint remain on the hidden blocks above the ceiling. They are not inscriptions meant for the public, okay? They are workmen's notes, quarry marks, gang names, instructions scribbled quickly before the stones were set into place. Some of them read like casual signatures, the ancient equivalent of "we were here," left not for eternity, but for their fellow workers. Yet, because the pyramid endured, these small, ordinary words survived too. When you picture them, you see not the grandeur of kings, but the humanity of builders, men pausing in torchlight to daub a name, then returning to the heavy labor of ropes and levers. The pyramid contains not just a pharaoh as eternity, but also the everyday chatter of his work crews, still visible in faded red. As centuries passed, other visitors came. During the Old Kingdom itself, priests and caretakers walked its passages, checking offerings, tending rituals. Their sandals scuffed the limestone floors. Their oil lamps smoked against the walls. After the decline of that age, silence grew thicker. For long periods, the pyramid stood alone, sealed, its interior forgotten, its exterior battered by time. Yet, curiosity never truly left. Ancient scribes wrote about the pyramids, describing them as wonders, as mountains made by men. Travelers approached from distant lands, staring upward, sketching their outlines, telling stories that blurred fact and myth. Some visitors came with reverence. They touched the stones, prayed to the spirits within, left small offerings in niches. Others came with more destructive intent. By the Middle Ages, treasure seekers hacked their way into the north face, carving a rough tunnel that still scars the pyramid today. Torches sputtered as they dug, iron tools bit into stone, voices echoed harshly. They sought gold, amulets, jewels, but the pyramid held none. The sarcophagus was empty, its treasures long gone or never there. What they left instead was their tunnel, a reminder of impatience carved into timeless stone. Yet even in this damage, something human persists. You imagine those intruders resting after hours of chiseling, their bodies exhausted, their lamps dimming. Perhaps they too felt awe, even as they broke through. Perhaps in their pauses, they fell silent, listening to the heavy air, realizing they had entered a place meant not for theft, but for eternity. The pyramid does not judge. It absorbs every act, whether reverent or restless, into its stillness. The red ink marks, still faint but visible, feel like whispers through time. You picture one of the builders, brush in hand, dipping it in pigment, scrawling a quick sign of his team's name, Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Minkaur. A little humor, a little pride, written in a moment, preserved for millennia. That human touch softens the monument. You no longer see only a king's tomb. You see a workplace, a community, a place where men laughed, teased, left marks on stone, the way you might leave initials carved into wood. Eternity, it turns out, remembers even the small gestures. Later visitors added their own marks. Greek travelers carved names, Roman soldiers scratched graffiti, Arabic historians left records in ink. Each era layered itself onto the pyramid, each believing it discovered something new, yet all merely joined the slow procession of eyes and hands. The pyramid did not change, but it allowed itself to be read again and again, each reader adding a note to the margin of its silence. You think of these markings as the pyramid's softer voice, not the grand alignment with stars, not the dazzling casing stones, but the quiet scribbles of people passing through. They remind you that history is not only kings and ceremonies. It is also workers leaning on brushes, travelers pausing with chisels, curious souls leaving faint traces behind. You imagine running your fingers over one of those red marks today, still visible after 45 centuries, and feeling the warmth of the hand that made it. Suddenly, the pyramid becomes less distant. Its eternity contains ordinary lives, just as your own life belongs to eternity in its small way. The night outside deepens further. Stars glint overhead. Wind carries grains of sand across the plateau, and the pyramid holds its inscriptions in silence. You think of all those visitors, priests, thieves, scribes, wanderers, and realize you are one of them too, in thought, if not in body. You too have entered, left your breath inside, imagined your mark. The pyramid will hold even that, folding it into the long memory of stone. You picture the pyramid long after its construction, already weathered, its casing stones partly stripped, its entrance sealed and forgotten. Centuries had passed. Dynasties had risen and fallen. The desert had shifted, and silence had thickened around the monument. Then, in the 9th century, a new visitor arrived, Caliph Almond, ruler of the Abbasid Empire, a man whose curiosity rivaled his authority. His story clings to the pyramid like a scar, the rough tunnel carved into its side, still visible today. Almond came to Giza around 820 CE. By then, the pyramids were already ancient, more than 3,000 years old. To him, they were mysteries, monuments built by forgotten hands, perhaps holding treasures beyond imagination. He ordered his men to dig into the north face, near the center, where they suspected an entrance must lie. But they did not know its true location. Their tunnel veered off at an angle, crude compared to the precision of the original passage. Pickaxes struck stone, hammers rang, dust filled the air. The silence of centuries broke into echoes of force, quarch in flickering torchlight, quarch in flickering torchlight. Sweat running down their faces, the smell of burning pitch thick in the air. Each blow resounded against stone that had stood unmoved for millennia. The pyramid resisted. Its core was too massive, its angles too exact. Yet persistence overcame. They chipped, hauled rubble, chipped again. The tunnel crept inward, foot by foot, jagged and raw, like a wound carved into smooth flesh. Legend says that as Almond's men dug, the sound of their picks echoed strangely. One day, they heard stone fall within the hollow space of the descending passage. Guided by that sound, they broke through, stumbling suddenly into the pyramid's original interior. The torchlight flared against polished walls, the air cool and ancient. They expected treasure, gold, chests brimming with jewels. But what they found was silence. The chambers were empty. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber held nothing. The great monument, after all their labor, yielded only stone. You imagine the disappointment, the torches guttering in the stillness, the men's voices hushed in confusion. Perhaps some felt awe despite the emptiness, realizing that this place was not meant to store wealth, but to hold eternity itself. But the caliph's men had come for treasure. They left with little more than rubble and dust, their tunnel still yawning as testimony to their impatience. The tunnel remains today, a harsh gouge in the north face, cutting clumsily toward the passages within. Tourists enter through it, their feet brushing the same rough walls carved by Unrevealed men. It is not graceful. It is not aligned. It tells a different story, not of precision, not of eternity, but of curiosity, urgent, forceful. It's human curiosity that could not resist the mystery. The pyramid tolerated even this. It allowed the wound, but it did not fall. Its silence endured. You pause with this thought. The pyramid has always invited curiosity. Ancient scribes wrote of it. Greek historians measured it. Medieval travelers gawked at it. Each wanted something from it. Knowledge, wealth, wonder. Each left their mark, but the pyramid remained. Almond's tunnel is only one example, but it is vivid, because it shows how even an impatient intrusion becomes part of the monument's long story. The pyramid does not erase what is done to it. It absorbs. It waits. It remains. You imagine standing inside the tunnel today. The walls are rough, not polished. You can see where picks struck stone, where rubble was pried loose. The air is heavy, the light dim. But ahead, the smooth limestone of the original passage waits, indifferent to the intrusion. The contrast is clear. The raw gouge of impatience meeting the calm geometry of the builders. To stand between them is to see two different kinds of human effort, one frantic, one patient. The pyramid contains both. The story of Almond is also a reminder. Sometimes curiosity finds less than it expects. The chambers held no treasure, no gold, only granite, limestone, silence. Yet perhaps that was the treasure. To open a monument so ancient and find nothing but calm is its own kind of lesson. Riches fade, stillness remains. All men may not have realized it, but his tunnel revealed the pyramid's true wealth, endurance, simplicity, the patience of stone. You let this reflection rest. Outside, the desert wind continues to brush the plateau, as it did in the 9th century, as it does now. Its pyramid breathes evenly, unmoved by tunnels or intrusions. Its almond Asgar is there, but it does not define the monument. The pyramid's silence defines itself, and as you breathe with it, you feel the same endurance begin to settle within you, steady and calm. Your thoughts drift forward in time, far beyond Almond's rough tunnel, into the present age, where the pyramid is explored, not with picks and torches, but with sensors, lasers, and quiet instruments. Even now, after centuries of study, it holds mysteries. Modern science approaches the monument gently, probing not with intrusion, but with light and mathematics, listening for secrets without disturbing the silence. Archaeologists and engineers have used laser scanning to map every surface, each block, each joint. They send beams across the pyramid's sides, capturing tiny deviations, building digital replicas accurate to the millimeter. To stand outside while such work is done is to see nothing. The pyramid does not change, does not reveal its cooperation. Yet inside the data, its geometry sings again. Perfect alignments, subtle shifts, stories of builders written in angles in stone. Others have used cosmic particles, called muons, that rain down from space. These pass easily through air, but are slowed by dense stone, by placing detectors inside the pyramid and waiting patiently. Scientists can watch how muons scatter, revealing voids and passages otherwise invisible. It is like listening to the heartbeat of the monument, each muon a quiet knock against its chest. In 2017, such scans revealed something unexpected, a large, unexplained void above the Grand Gallery, as long as a passenger plane. No one yet knows its purpose. It might be another relieving chamber, another hidden passage, or something entirely unimagined. The pyramid, even now, guards its inner silence. Ground-penetrating radar has also swept across the plateau, tracing the bedrock, searching for cavities, tunnels, foundations of structures long vanished. Drones hum overhead, photographing every block in patient grids. Computers stitch the images together, revealing patterns invisible to the eye. And yet, despite all this technology, the feeling remains the same. Mystery endures. For every discovery, another question unfolds. You picture a researcher in the king's chamber, adjusting a detector, setting it carefully against the granite wall. He checks the angle, writes down numbers, then leaves it there for weeks. The pyramid does not resist. It simply waits. The data accumulates slowly, as slow as stone itself, until at last patterns emerge. In this way, the modern world converses with the ancient one, not through chisels and hammers, but through patience that echoes the builder's own. What rests inside? Perhaps nothing more than stone and void. Perhaps chambers still undiscovered, shafts yet unexplored. The absence of certainty is part of the pyramid's calm. It does not need to reveal everything. Silence is not emptiness, but fullness, a presence so complete it does not require explanation. You realize that to know everything would be to diminish it. The pyramid remains more powerful because it withholds. Modern surveys, for all their precision, also remind us of scale. To map every block is to confront again how many there are, how vast the effort was, how enduring the result remains. Computers may measure what eyes cannot, but the feeling is the same as it was thousands of years ago. Oh, patience, humility. You let your imagination drift into the void above the grand gallery. Darkness stretches there, untouched since the day it was sealed. Dust lies still. No footsteps, no breath has disturbed it. A space created and forgotten, or perhaps remembered only in silence. You picture it, not as treasure, not as secret, but as stillness itself, preserved perfectly. A chamber of nothing, yet filled with meaning. Sometimes absence is the greatest presence. Outside, tourists gather, cameras click, guides explain. Inside, sensors hum, data streams quietly into laptops. Yet the pyramid does not yield to hurry. It allows itself to be measured, but never mastered. It keeps something always beyond reach, a reminder that eternity is not for grasping, but for resting within. You breathe slowly, imagining yourself as one of those sensors, simply waiting, listening, recording the calm heartbeat of stone. The desert wind moves again, brushing sand across the plateau, as it always has. Stars glimmer overhead. Muons fall unseen, passing through blocks as they always will. The pyramid continues, massive, silent, slightly revealed, but never fully. Its gift is not to explain itself, but to endure. And as you listen to that endurance, you feel your own rest deepen, your own thoughts soften, till you two are simply present, a quiet observer, resting within the stillness of time. You have walked the plateau in thought, felt the desert wind across your skin, and followed the long arc of history from the first quarrymen to the quiet tools of modern science. You have seen the pyramid bright with its white casing, then worn into gentler texture. You have entered its passages, descending, climbing, standing within granite chambers, listening to shafts that point toward stars. You have met the workers in their village, shared bread and beer, and watched the Sphinx rest in stillness through the centuries. You have followed boats from the Nile, processions through temples, the red-ink marks of builders in the rough tunnel of medieval curiosity. And yet, after all of it, the pyramid remains unchanged. It stands as it always has, steady, immense, unmoved. It accepts curiosity, reverence, intrusion, science, and it endures. Now you let that endurance flow into you. Your body lies as the pyramid lies, broad base, steady form, calm, weight, pressing downward. Your breath becomes the desert wind, low, even, unhurried. Thoughts drift like caravans across the horizon, slow, dissolving into distance. The stars wheel overhead, just as they did for the builders, just as they will for those who come long after. You do not need to reach for them. You only need to rest beneath them, as the pyramid rests, as the plateau rests, as the Sphinx gazes into silence. And as your eyes grow heavy, you feel yourself becoming part of this stillness, another presence folded gently into the night. No urgency, no need to move, only calm, only quiet. The pyramid remains, the wind continues, and you too settle into the long patience of sleep.